Here's Kinley Savannah Marlowe, 35 years old, standing in the middle of the Westin Crown Center Grand Ballroom while 250 guests raise their glasses for the new CEO. My sister Brooke had just finished her victory speech, smiling like she'd already won the war. Then she leaned into the microphone and said it loud enough for every phone camera to catch. "You're relieved of your duties, effective immediately. Security will walk you out." 250 heads turned to me at once. Champagne stopped halfway to lips. Someone actually gasped. I didn't flinch. I reached for the guest badge clipped to my black dress, slid it off, and set it gently on the rim of my untouched champagne flute. Then I looked straight at Brooke and said, calm as ever, "Tell Mom and Dad the board meets in 3 hours." I turned heels, clicking across the marble floor, flashes popping behind me like paparazzi at a scandal. The double doors closed with a soft thud. If you've ever been publicly humiliated by your own sister at her celebration party, you know that feeling in your stomach. Drop a like if you've got a family story that still makes your blood boil, and comment below, what's the worst thing a sibling ever did to you at a big event? Trust me, what happens in the next 3 hours will top every single one of those stories. Hit subscribe so you don't miss how this night completely flips upside down. When those doors shut behind me, the real countdown began. I slid into the driver's seat of my black Tahoe, the engine humming to life before the ballroom doors had even stopped swinging. 28 miles to Lee's Summit, 32 minutes on a clear night, plenty of time. I kept the radio off. The only sound was tires on asphalt and the quiet click of my turn signal as I merged onto I-470. By the time I pulled into the garage, the house was dark, except for the motion light above the workbench. I didn't bother going inside. I flipped open the laptop I'd left charging there since 6 that morning, logged in with my face, and opened the folder labeled Continuity. Everything was already drafted: the encrypted email blast to every board member and registered shareholder, the certified mail packets addressed and stamped, the digital signature time-stamped at 6:03 a.m. All I had to do was hit send. One click for the email. One click for the courier pickup scheduled in 14 minutes. Done. People think majority ownership happens overnight. It doesn't. It starts with a single half-page agreement when you're 19 and too stubborn to take a salary like everyone else. Back in 2009, Marlowe Nexus was still a 20-person operation running out of a warehouse in North Kansas City. Dad offered me a director title and $180,000 a year. I turned it down. Told him I'd rather take equity. He laughed, signed over 0.8%, and said, "Fine kid, own the dirt under the building." I never sold a single share. In 2011, when we built the Midwest cold chain expansion, I took another 4% instead of a bonus. In 2014, after Brooke almost signed us into a disastrous partnership that would have cost $42 million, I quietly convinced the board to add Section 14(c). They called it paranoia. I called it insurance. By 2016, the California refrigerated tech startup we acquired gave me another 12% for structuring the deal. In 2020, when Mom and Dad wanted liquidity for their lake house remodel, I bought their golden shares at fair market value, no family discount. They thought they were helping me out. They weren't. Point by point, deal by deal, I kept stacking until the ledger showed 71% under my name alone. No one ever put it on the website. No one ever engraved it on an office door. It just sat there in Connecticut filings, quiet and unbreakable. I closed the laptop, leaned back against the headrest, and let out a breath I'd been holding since Brooke opened her mouth at that podium. Across town, my little brother Dylan was live on Instagram phone, angled to catch the crystal chandeliers behind him. I could picture it without looking, him grinning next to Brooke, caption, already typed, new era loading, family business next generation. The likes were pouring in. He had no idea the era he was celebrating had exactly 3 hours left to live. In the VIP section, the first phone buzzed. Edward Morrison, the silver-haired attorney who had drafted every major contract for Marlowe Nexus since the company was 3 guys and a warehouse in 1997, felt the buzz against his chest while lifting a bite of grilled salmon. One glance at the screen turned his face the color of printer paper. He rose so fast his chair screeched across the marble loud enough to cut through the string quartet. Without apology, he seized Dad's elbow with one hand and Mom's wrist with the other, and steered them straight through the nearest service door. The narrow backstage hallway smelled of hot catering trays and fresh flowers. Edward swiped a keycard he definitely wasn't supposed to possess, locked the door behind them, and handed Dad his phone like it was wired to explode. Dad took it with both hands, thumbs whitening on the edges. He read the cover page, once blinked hard, read it again. His gaze snagged on the single paragraph that mattered, Section 14C Emergency Continuity Clause, drafted and executed in 2014 after Brooke had nearly signed a West Coast distribution deal that would have hemorrhaged $42 million and 3 years of lawsuits. The board had called me paranoid. Dad had signed the amendment while half-watching a Chiefs game on the office television. He had never bothered to read past the title. He read every word, now lips moving without sound. When he hit the line stating that any unilateral executive termination by a non-equity appointee instantly suspended all authority and reverted control to the majority shareholder, the air left his lungs in one slow collapse. His shoulders folded forward like someone had cut invisible strings. Mom leaned over his arm, caught sight of my electronic signature at the bottom, and the tears started before she reached the end of the second sentence. Not dramatic sobs, just silent, unstoppable streams that carved mascara rivers down both cheeks. She pressed a white linen napkin to her mouth to muffle the small broken noises escaping. Edward kept his voice barely above a whisper. "Rick, this is live. Timestamp 6:03 this morning. Every board member and registered shareholder just received the identical package. We are inside the 3-hour window. There is no pause button." Dad looked up, eyes glassy and unfocused. "She doesn't know yet." "Not yet," Edward confirmed. "She's still cutting the damn cake." Out in the ballroom, Brooke was laughing at something the MC whispered, sliding the silver knife through 4 tiers of champagne-soaked vanilla while cameras flashed like lightning. She lifted a perfect slice, waved it at the crowd, and beamed like the queen of everything she was about to lose. Mom's voice cracked through the tears. "Rick, bring her in here. We stop this before it goes any further." Dad was already reaching for the handle, knuckles white. As Mom dabbed the last tear with her crumpled napkin, the door flew open. Brooke stepped into the small backstage room first. Dylan right on her heels, both still glowing from the spotlight and applause that had followed them off the main floor. The door slammed shut behind Dad with enough force to rattle the framed supplier awards on the wall. The smile that had been plastered on my sister's face all night didn't even flicker at first. "What exactly is this about?" she asked, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her white blazer like she had a red carpet interview waiting. "Did Kinley throw one of her dramatic fits and run crying to you?" Dylan snorted, thumbs flying over his phone screen. Typical. She always needed the attention when things didn't go her way. Dad didn't speak. He simply turned the iPad around on the small conference table and slid it across the polished surface so the screen faced them. The latest official Connecticut filing filled the display, ownership breakdown freshly stamped that morning, notarized, certified, and impossible to dispute. 71% sat in bold under the single line that read, "Kinley Savannah Marlowe." Brooke's eyes locked on the number. Her perfectly lined red lips parted, but nothing came out. The confidence drained from her face in slow motion, leaving only shock. Dylan leaned over her shoulder, expecting some kind of joke or glitch. When the same figure stared back at him, his smirk vanished like someone had flipped a switch. His mouth closed, opened again. No sound. Just a soft wheeze. Brooke finally managed to whisper, thin and razor-sharp, "This has to be fake. Some cheap trick. She can't possibly own it's real." Edward cut in, voice flat and professional, the same tone he used in depositions. State stamped at 8:47 this morning. You triggered the exact clause she authored the day you tried to sign that $42 million disaster on the West Coast. Brooke's manicured fingers snatched her phone from the crystal-embellished clutch thumb already stabbing my contact. Straight to voicemail. She tried again, harder this time. Same cold, automated greeting. She had been blocked since sunrise, and the realization hit her like a slap. "This is insane," she hissed, spinning toward Dad so fast her blazer flared. "You let her do this. You let her hide it from all of us." Dad's face had turned to granite, jaw locked, eyes hard. "I signed what was put in front of me every quarter. Same as you do, without ever reading past the first paragraph." Dylan finally found words, voice cracking like a teenager. "We can still fix this. Call the emergency lawyers, file for injunction, anything." Edward shook his head once, slow and final. "You have less than 3 hours before the mandatory meeting is called. After that, the vote is binding under majority control. No court in Connecticut moves faster than 71%. Brooke's breathing turned shallow and fast. She looked from the iPad to Mom's tear-stained cheeks, to Dad's clenched fists, searching every face for an ally, a lifeline, anything. The room shrank around her with every frantic glance. She tried one last time, voice breaking completely. She wouldn't destroy her own family over petty revenge. Dad met her eyes without blinking. "You destroyed any chance of mercy when you humiliated her in front of 250 people who used to work for her." Silence swallowed the rest of the oxygen in the room. Brooke stood frozen, staring at the glowing screen, while the truth sank in like ice water. Dylan kept refreshing his phone, thumb shaking, hoping for a miracle that would never arrive. While Brooke still stared at the iPad, every board member's phone began to vibrate at once. The first phone to vibrate was Harold Weinstein's, the board chairman, while his fork hovered halfway to his mouth. The screen lit up with the encrypted attachment and a subject line in bold red: "Emergency Shareholder Meeting, Section 14C, activated." Harold's jaw tightened. He set the fork down, pushed back his chair, and walked straight to the head of security stationed near the east exit. One sentence, low and clipped: "Lock the room. No one leaves." Within 15 seconds, every other board member's device followed. Margaret Klein opened hers first, eyes widening behind her reading glasses. Paul Delgado cursed under his breath. Phones started rising around the ballroom like black mirrors catching the chandelier light. The jazz quartet hit a wrong note and simply stopped playing. Security moved fast. 6 additional guards in black suits appeared at the 4 main exits and both service doors. Arms folded, feet planted, polite smiles that said, "Try me." A venture capitalist near the coat check made a half-hearted move toward the lobby. A guard stepped sideways and blocked the path without a word. Another guest, phone already to his ear, tried the west corridor and found the same wall of muscle. The message was clear and instant: the celebration was over. On stage, the MC, a local news anchor hired for the night, sensed the shift. He took the microphone from a confused server who had been about to announce dessert. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice steady but louder than necessary, "please remain seated and keep your seats. We will have a brief, unscheduled announcement from the majority shareholder in just a moment. Thank you for your patience." The house lights dimmed one more notch. The string lights over the cake table stayed bright, making the 4-tier champagne masterpiece look suddenly ridiculous. Brooke hurried back out from the private corridor, cheeks flushed, crimson hair slightly out of place for the first time all evening. She grabbed the microphone stand with both hands to steady herself, knuckles bone white. "Everything is perfectly fine," she declared, the words rushing together. "This is just a minor administrative update. Please everyone stay calm and enjoy the rest of the evening." Her right hand trembled so violently the microphone squealed with feedback. A ripple of nervous laughter floated up from table 12, then died fast. No one was buying it anymore. Dylan appeared at the edge of the stage, trying to look casual while sliding along the velvet wall toward the service exit. Phone pressed tight to his ear, lips moving fast, eyes darting. He made it 3 steps before a guard materialized in front of him, shook his head once and pointed back toward the ballroom floor. Dylan froze, trapped between the guard and 200 staring faces. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees in under a minute. Champagne lost its bubbles in untouched flutes. Waitstaff stood frozen mid-step with silver trays of petit fours. Phones kept lighting up with the same document, the same ownership table, the same name in bold at the very top. A woman at table 6 gasped loud enough for half the room to hear. Her husband tilted his screen so she could read. The gasp spread outward like a wave. Someone whispered 71%, and the number traveled faster than the document itself. Brooke tried again, forcing a smile that looked painted on with a shaky hand. Really, everyone there is absolutely nothing to worry about. We'll be back to celebrating in just a moment. Please, stay seated. Her voice cracked on the last word. The microphone squealed again. No one clapped. No one cheered. The jazz quartet stayed silent, instruments resting on their knees. The MC returned to the stage gently but firmly, taking the microphone from Brooke's shaking fingers. Once again, please remain in your seats. The majority shareholder is on site and will address the room directly in the next few minutes. Brooke's grip slipped completely. The microphone stand wobbled dangerously. Dylan stood pinned against the wall, face drained of color under the golden chandelier's phone now hanging useless at his side. As the stage lights dimmed further for the next segment, the main doors swung open. I walked straight down the center aisle in a simple black sheath dress, laptop tucked under one-arm, heels, silent on the thick carpet runner. No entourage, no dramatic entrance music, no security flanking me. Just the soft click of the double doors closing behind my back and the sudden hush that swallowed every clink of glass and murmur of conversation. 250 faces tracked my path like I was the only moving thing in the room. I stepped onto the low stage, placed the laptop on the podium Brooke had abandoned minutes earlier, and opened it. The 60-foot screen behind me flared to life with the secure voting portal I had personally coded and tested over 3 sleepless nights in 2018. The interface was clean, brutal, and impossible to hack. "Good evening," I said into the microphone, letting my voice carry without effort. "My name is Kinley Savannah Marlowe. Under Section 14(c) of the shareholder agreement, I am calling an emergency shareholder meeting effective right now. Every registered voter in this room should already have the link on their devices." A wave of phones rose like a dark tide. Fingers started tapping. Harold Weinstein, chairman for the last 12 years, rose from the front row without hesitation. He climbed the side steps, took position beside me, and adjusted his glasses. He had seen the packet an hour ago. He already knew the script. Motion on the floor. Harold announced, voice steady and formal. Immediate rescission of the appointments of Brooke Marlowe Hastings as Chief Executive Officer and Dylan Marlowe as Vice President of Sales. The majority shareholder has proposed. "Do I have a second?" Margaret Klein stood first, her pearl necklace catching the spotlight. "Second." Paul Delgado was right behind her. "Second." 3 more board members rose in quick succession. The chain was unbreakable. The voting app went live. Green for yes. Red for no. Percentages ticked upward in real time on the massive screen, bright against the dimmed house lights. Brooke bolted from the wings, heels skidding. "This is insane. You cannot hold a meeting in the middle of..." Harold lifted one hand, calm but absolute. "The chair recognizes only registered voters at this time." She froze mid-step, mouth open, realizing no one was listening. Dylan tried from the side aisle, voice cracking. "Kinley, come on. We're family. You're seriously doing this here." Now I didn't spare him a glance. I watched the numbers instead. 58% green. 61. 64. Small shareholders, warehouse managers who had earned fractional equity over decades, mid-level engineers who had taken stock instead of raises, tapped yes without hesitation. They remembered who had fought for their bonuses when Brooke wanted to cut costs. They remembered who had personally rewritten the disaster recovery code after the 2021 flood threat. 67%. Long-term institutional investors who had watched me turn down flashier titles for deeper ownership didn't even blink. Their votes locked in within seconds. 69%. Brooke tried again, louder, desperate. Harold, shut this down. She's bluffing. Harold didn't flinch. 70% achieved. Motion threshold met. 71% snapped into place and froze solid green across the entire screen. Harold turned to the room. Motion carries by majority shareholder authority. Appointments are rescinded. All executive privileges revoked. Meeting adjourned. The final tally stayed lit for 5 full seconds, burning itself into every retina in the ballroom. A collective exhale rippled outward. Someone dropped a fork. The clatter sounded like gunfire. Brooke stared at the numbers like she could will them to change. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Dylan's phone slipped from his fingers and hit the marble with a sharp crack that echoed under the chandeliers. I closed the laptop with a soft snap. When the last hand dropped and the result flashed across the screen, Harold's voice cut through the stunned silence like a knife through silk. The motion is adopted unanimously. Brooke Marlowe Hastings and Dylan Marlowe are hereby relieved of all executive duties and titles effective immediately upon this adjournment. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Brooke lunged forward from the edge of the stage, her heels scraping the polished wood. You can't do this. This is my company. Our family's legacy. I didn't raise my voice. I turned the laptop screen toward the projector feed, clicking to the next slide with a deliberate motion. The large display behind us shifted, illuminating the entire ballroom in cold blue light. I just did. And to ensure a smooth transition, there are additional measures in place. The slide filled with the pre-signed addendum I had prepared at dawn, every line reviewed by outside counsel. It outlined the immediate activation of the 10-year non-compete clause, barring both from any role in the food supply chain software sector or related industries nationwide. No consulting gigs, no board seats at competitors, no advisory whispers to clients we'd built together. Below that, in bold bullet points, immediate forfeiture of all golden shares previously granted, along with permanent revocation of future dividend rights tied to their executive packages. Those shares weren't just paper. They were the safety net Brooke had cashed in for her Hamptons weekends, the buffer Dylan used to fund his vintage car collection. Gone in one click. Brooke's eyes scanned the text line by line, her lips parting as the implications hit. Color drained from her face until she looked like a ghost under the spotlights. Dylan, standing just behind her, clutched the podium edge, his skin turning a sickly gray. He looked like he might actually be sick right there on the Persian rug. Security? I said quietly into the lapel mic, my tone even almost bored. 4 guards materialized from the wings, moving with the practiced efficiency of men who had trained for exactly this kind of corporate theater. 2 positioned themselves beside Brooke, taking her by the elbows, gentle but unyielding like escorts at a black tie event gone wrong. The other 2 did the same with Dylan, one hand light on his shoulder, the other ready at his back. My sister twisted against their hold, her blazer riding up, voice rising in pitch. Dad, Mom, do something. Tell them to stop. Dad stood rooted beside Mom near the front row, his hands clasped so tight the knuckles showed white against his silver wedding band. His eyes stayed fixed on the floor, tracing the intricate pattern in the carpet as if it held some answer he'd missed all these years. Mom's face was a mask of streaked mascara and trembling lips, but she didn't move an inch, didn't call out, didn't reach for her phone. Their combined 8% stake, once a comfortable cushion for retirement golf trips, meant nothing in this room now. No vote to cast, no voice to raise, no power left to wield against the tide I had built, brick by notarized brick. Brooke's pleas turned desperate as the guards guided her toward the service corridor off stage, the one lined with emergency lights and forgotten coat racks. Kinley, please. We're blood. Sisters, you can't just erase us like this. I met her eyes for the first time all night, holding the gaze without blinking. Blood doesn't override contracts. And tonight, you signed the one that ends this chapter. Dylan was already halfway down the steps, his shoulders hunched and shaking under the guard's steady pressure. He didn't fight like Brooke did, just stumbled along, head down, the fight draining out of him with every step. The doors to the corridor closed behind them with the same soft, echoing thud they had made when I walked out 3 hours earlier, except this time there was no coming back. The room stayed frozen for another 5 endless seconds, the kind where you can hear your own heartbeat over the hum of the air conditioning. A single cough from the back row broke the spell. Then Harold cleared his throat into the microphone, his baritone steady as ever. This emergency meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all for your attention and cooperation this evening. Dessert service will resume shortly. I closed the laptop with a quiet snap, the screen going dark. The projector hummed off. I gathered my things and walked off stage past the velvet ropes and the staring faces of partners who had once shaken Brooke's hand like she owned the future. Now they nodded at me, subtle shifts in allegiance written in averted eyes, and murmured congratulations. Mom finally moved, then taking a single step toward the corridor, but Dad's hand on her arm stopped her cold. They stayed there, spectators to the end of an era they had started but never fully controlled. Outside, the Kansas City night air hit cool against my skin as I slipped into the waiting car. The driver didn't ask questions. He just pulled away from the Weston's curb headlights, cutting through the drizzle that had started sometime during the vote. 4 months later, everything looked different. The new nameplate on my office door was simple brushed steel: Kinley Savannah Marlowe, Chairwoman and Chief Executive Officer. No fanfare, no company-wide email. The next morning, the building just opened like any other day, except every decision now ran through me. First quarter numbers came in 28% above forecast. The restructuring I had planned for years rolled out without resistance. Warehouse automation contracts that Brooke had stalled for 18 months were signed in 9 days. Clients who had been on the fence called back themselves. Stability sells. Brooke listed the Lake Lotawana house 3 weeks after the gala. The 6-bedroom lakefront property with the infinity pool and private dock sat on the market for 47 days before a cash buyer from Dallas snapped it up. She needed every penny to cover the accelerated inheritance tax bill that hit when her golden shares were clawed back. The IRS doesn't wait for family drama to settle. Dylan sent out 211 resumes in 11 months. Every interview ended the same way: polite smiles, then silence. The non-compete was airtight and public record. No one in food supply software would touch him. He finally took a part-time sales job at a car dealership in Blue Springs Commission, only wearing the same tired blazer he had worn the night he lost everything. Dad put the Leawood house up for sale in October. Mom refused to stay in Kansas City after the gala photos hit the local society pages. They closed on a 2-bedroom condo in Naples, Florida, overlooking the Gulf. The moving trucks came on a Tuesday. I found out the same way everyone else did. The real estate listing went live. No goodbye dinner, no phone call, just a forwarded change of address form from the post office. The first text from Brooke came 2 weeks after the vote. A single line. I'm sorry, I deleted it. The second came a month later, longer, explaining, pleading. Deleted. Dylan tried next, voice cracking in a 3-minute voicemail about needing a reference. Straight to trash. Mom sent a birthday card in November, handwritten, asking if we could talk. It went into the shredder unopened. I never answered. Not once. Power isn't inherited. It isn't gifted at a gala with champagne and speeches. It's built share by share, contract by contract, over 16 years of choosing ownership over applause. I never wanted the stage. I wanted the foundation. And foundations don't apologize when the house finally falls. Some families break quietly. Ours broke in front of 250 witnesses, under crystal chandeliers with security holding the doors. That night taught me the only lesson that matters: blood might share a last name, but it doesn't share a vote. And votes are the only thing that ever counted.